K2B Wastelanders, welcome to the Lost Holotapes channel, where we delve into the historical lore of the Fallout world. Today we will continue the analysis of the Overseer series and move on to the examination of their gameplay part. Of course, I recommend checking out the previous video and playing the mods yourself to understand the context of what's happening. Also, don't forget to support the videos with likes, subscriptions and comments. Well, hop into the vertibird, we are flying back to the Mojave again. Let's start with the gameplay lore of the first mod, the Initiation. First and foremost, it's important to note that the storyline of the Great Hunts in the mod aligns with their storyline of evacuating from the Mojave to Wyoming, and takes place during their preparation for the journey, which immediately gives the mod a bunch of validity points because it also corresponds to the current version of the Lost Holotapes. At this point, Eliza as a character has not yet been introduced, and the initiation ritual is carried out by the courier. However, in the second mod, she will undergo her own initiation as part of the plot. Spoiling ahead, I'll say that a major problem with the sequel is the complete detachment of Eliza as an active character, although the mod was named after her. Her role boils down to playing a puppy following the courier and not advancing the plot in any way. Therefore, I will consider her the protagonist of both modes, because everything the courier does can be projected onto her without any plot contradictions. So, Eliza, aimlessly searching for her place in the world after deserting from the Hader army, tries to find it within the ranks of the Great Hunts. The events of this mod, as well as the following one, Eliza's, take place in 2282 between two main NCR quests, persuading the Hunts to break off their engagement with Caesar's Legion, and the subsequent quest, destroying Hidden Valley Bunker. The Grey Hunts are already preparing to move to Wyoming, wrapping up their business in the Mojave. Apparently they lack hands for everything, so instead of the traditional beating of a newcomer, Eliza is sent to perform several tasks to be accepted into the Mongols. The first task was to collect bottle caps from a client who didn't pay for a batch of jet. Next, Eliza needs to eliminate Marty Page, a scoundrel who robbed Hunt scouts. For a greater realism, I would say that the Hunt sent a group Eliza was part of, not just her on her own. After all, she's not Terminator like the courier. The Hunts head to Crescent Canyon, where a group of Big Daddy's men also arrives to deal with Marty. The victory in the fight goes to the Hunts. The Hunts realize that Big Daddy, under the threat of his own death from the Legion's gladiuses, will try to eliminate them before they leave. They decide to take out Big Daddy themselves, while he doesn't expect it. To do this, they, along with Eliza, raid Frank Doyle's gang, who collaborated with Big Daddy and had a key to his shelter. The deserted but corpse-filled Soul Saloon after the raid is taken over by the Fiends. After finding out where Big Daddy is hiding, the Hunts raid Fort Cavern and destroy the gang, as well as the Legionnaire delegation present in the cave at that time. It can also be assumed that the attack on the NCR outpost at Bitter Springs, which Craig Boone had to defend, was initiated early from this very cave. Celebrating victory, the Hunts patch Eliza into their ranks. Let's smoothly transition to the gameplay part of the sequel of the Initiation, Eliza. The Mongols are still in the process of preparations, but they urgently need caps to stock up on provisions, weapons and all necessary gear before heading to Wyoming. They undertake various tasks for their business partner, Vincent Moreno, from the Myrtus, as well as his business associate, Roy Sullivan. Vincent and Roy happen to have a project that they need assistance with. They are still attempting to organize an underground poker club in Vegas for high-ranking NCR officials. At Roy's request, the Hunts evict squatters from the Summer Springs building, which the businessmen convert into a club. Next, Roy wants to get rid of the Fiends at Soul Saloon, who have just settled there but have already caused him problems by stirring up trouble in the areas of influence. He sends them a man with an offer to inherit Roy and Frank Doyle's partnership, but the Fiends prove to have deaf ears and dismember the messenger with a circular saw. The Hunts are asked to eliminate the Fiends, which they do with great pleasure. The Hunts also visit Benny Alberta, who was shooting another hit, mischievous ranger captured by Legion Boys 7, and squeeze out his depths, threatening to release his studio to new directors from New Reno. Because Courier No. 6 took out the leader of the Fiends at Val 3, Motor Runner, the Fiends suspended their drug purchases from the Hunts. Although both raiders groups tear each other apart with fervor, business is business. So the Hunts increased drug supplies to Prim, Novak and Westside, demanding that their suppliers double their orders. Next, Vincent asks to deliver a package to Sheriff Jim Ferrar in New Rockwell. So the Hunts with Eliza end up in the settlement beyond the Mesquite Mountains. In the town, they are hired by Samuel Green, who not only asks but demands them to clear out the river rats in the bunker on the riverbank so he can access samples of the plague virus, which were experimented on 200 years ago and could be used against the Brotherhood of Steel in Hidden Valley. The Hunts agree, but they find no virus samples in the semi-destroyed bunker. But at least the head of the NCR bounty hunting office, Sawyer, was willing to buy scalps of the savages. Nevertheless, with this raid, the Huns helped the NCR as they also eliminated a Legion squad conducting the assimilation procedure of the tribe. Besides bounty hunting, the Mojave Affairs Office oversees Green's activities, and realizing that he won't provide any useful information anymore, Sawyer decides to eliminate the renegade, especially since he went too far with slave trading and searching for bioweapons. The office sends rangers to deal with him in New Rockwell, surprising Farrar and his assistants. A shootout ensues between NCR rangers and paladins. During the assault on Green's hideout, his assistants killed all the slaves they had, which is a bit sad. The paladins were destroyed, and among the documents found were records of their cooperation with Roy, although presumably the NCR knew about it already. At the end of the mod, the player is given a choice of what to do with Roy, either accept a bribe or demand the release of the slaves, after which he will start screaming, running around the room and calling his pet super mutant. If we follow the premise that the NCR Rangers defeated the paladins, then they would have hardly leave Roy unnoticed, and at best he would be arrested. Nevertheless, we will still need to remove Roy from Freeside, as it will be difficult to fit him into the lore of future modes such as Tales from New Reno. So after August 2282, the NCR will take him into custody. As the mod progresses, we learn news that will be important in future modes. Senator Burke's son, Adam Burke, has been accused of child molestation, and a crime case has been opened against him. His father is trying to get him out of it in every possible way, using the entire available arsenal of the state apparatus. The third mod in the series, Headhunting, is a bounty hunting mod, as the name suggests. The main problem with bounty mods is that they are usually very dull due to their repetitiveness and lack of need to carefully craft exposition. Constantly killing faceless characters won't keep the player engaged for long, but the Overseer wouldn't be himself if he made everything so simple. Unlike many other similar mods, many of the contracts are to some extent related to the overall story due to previously encountered characters, such as Roy Sullivan or Benny Alberta. Additionally, a huge emphasis was placed on describing the contracts and receiving snarky comments about them from the quest giver, adding flavor and Borderlands vibes. I must also note that the system of headhunting is logically constructed within the lore. A person must buy out the contract and only one at a time. This makes sense from the perspective of the shadow business. Competitors don't kill each other and pay a guaranteed deposit. The firm still gets earnings. Not to mention that the mod is traditionally filled with various jokes, and there was even a note with a fun inferior's rant about Eugene Schrader, which was left in the game files for the player, because his dialect script didn't work at all. In general, the Overseer knows how to make mods and surprise the player. Let's talk about the mod from a lore perspective. I think the events of the mod should take place in 2282, parallel to Eliza. Since in headhunting type modes the protagonist's identity is largely irrelevant, we can imagine him as the founder of a headhunting agency, Joe Tooley, or some random bounty hunters and mercenaries. One of the main clients is Ryan O'Neill, a member of the West Side Militia, to whom we will return in one of the next mods. We won't go through all 30 contracts because not all of them are interesting or related to the overall narrative. Some of them are humorous. There are minor contracts like killing a drunkard from Freeside or a couple of drug dealers. Let's just run through some of the more significant ones. Thus, by completing the contracts, Courier/Tooley takes out John Lee, a pimp from New Rockwell ordered by escaped prostitutes. Dick Johnson Jr., personal lawyer of Senator Burke, defending his pedophile son Adam in court. For his excellent work, the senator gave him 2 months of revelry on the strip. In my playthrough, the protagonist finds him in Brimstone, and to avoid attracting the attention of security, uses an anti-material rifle, of course. Pornstar Chunks Woodcock left Benny Alberta's set to join the Legion in Cottonwood. He starred in the wonderful series of films Mischievous Ranger 2-6, so he was in a Legion costume. However, he failed to blend in with the Legionnaires, and they crucified him. Ryan O'Neill puts out a contract on the Bodine clan. Lately, they have become a terrible problem for Caravaneers, as they have been robbing them. During the contract execution, we can find an 85-page document describing the history of the clan, which cannot be read beyond the first page, which is super unfortunate. Melvin Feldstein, a robotics genius rejected by women. After his robot started attacking travelers in South Vegas, a contract was put out on him. However, we only find his ashes and neatly placed glasses as a cherry on top. After a fantastic conversation with his bot, we learned that he took too literally his owner's drunken request to destroy humanity, starting with himself. Jared Ross, a sniper suffering from PTSD after Bitter Springs, hunting travelers. The Crimson Caravan puts out a contract on him for the loss of their caravan. Caleb Alquist also takes out a contract on him, and it is quite possible that he is the one who fulfilled it. At Casa Madrugada, one rich client kidnaps the daughter of another rich client. They agree to make the deal directly at Casa, despite the protests of Luis Marquez. Luis, having accumulated enough caps for a comfortable retirement, hands Casa over to his lieutenant. The meeting of the three sides, including the club's security, turns into a Mexican standoff. They all kill each other. Morton, Jones and Clancy Moss, lieutenants of Sheridan, establish a camp near the tunnel on the North Road. They prepare a foothold for Sheridan's return and plan to attack Peter Springs and Camp Bravo to mark their presence. A former comrade of Alquist becomes the client for their heads. After the death of Sheridan's lieutenants, raiders from Samir's crew begin to roam south through the North Road tunnel, constantly threatening the NCR Camp Bravo. They catch and torture both Legionnaires and NCR soldiers and feed the bodies to a pet cannibal. The NCR is tired of raid and puts a chain on the tunnel. Samir's raiders were quite surprised by such audacity, but founded an outpost in the North Road tunnel, meanwhile looking for other ways to access the New Vegas region. Eugene Schrader becomes the target of the final contract. The client is Roy Sullivan because Eugene started threatening him. Eugene apparently has a habit of threatening every business partner of his. Not sure how far you can go in business with that. Cross-referencing this lore piece with War Trash, in which the eponymous faction of mercenaries took a contract to eliminate slave trader Zala, we can infer that they are the ones who take the contract from Jotula and execute it by eliminating Schrader. This is not only sound interesting as we have a certain protagonist in this narrative snippet, but also sounds more logical as it is one thing, a lone mercenary attacks the fearsome Schrader, and another thing, a whole faction of such mercenaries. It is also funny that a contract was put out on Roy Sullivan himself, but he bought it out from Tully. Let's move on to the fourth mod in the series, North Road. The main plotline is related to the hunt for Adam Bork, son of an NCR senator, accused of child molesting. His associates hire General Brandy's group to escort Adam far beyond the NCR to Fogarty Manor. Brandy's group smuggled him through Madsen, paying the toll. It's amusing that they have Sergeant Bodine on their service, who constantly received reprimands for moonshining. Well, you know, those Bodines. The mod introduces a new companion, former chem addict Todd, now a member of the Westside Militia. In principle, he can be considered the protagonist, although he won't learn anything expositional about him. As the Overseer said, he just wanted to use the character he was developing for another mode. In any case, the protagonist, whoever he is, perhaps even a whole group of mercenaries, takes a contract to search for and deliver Adam Bork from the North Road to the NCR outpost Bravo. I wonder why the NCR didn't send their own squad to search for Adam and instead used the services of some junkie who got the contract from some rager. In such a case, I would imagine that the NCR would issue such contracts, including the elimination of Sheridan in Brighton, through the Mojave Affairs Office. Overall, this could be justified plot-wise, as even the NCR needs to get their hands dirty occasionally, and of course they would prefer to soil someone else's. The first thing to do to get to the North Road is to clear the North Tunnel. Passing by the ruined camp of Sheridan's lieutenants, the protagonist heads into the darkness, where he takes out Samir's outpost. Meanwhile, Hader's raiders attacked the legionary camp and destroyed it. They didn't wait for reinforcement and supplies to come to the camp, but made a quick strike as soon as they learned of their presence. General Brandy's group, trying to occupy themselves with something, attacks raiders in Hannigan's armory to acquire weapons. They are still in the northern part of the region, as is Fogarty Manor, so since the group has come so far, why not clear out the armory while they're there? The town of Madsen, tired of local raids, announces rewards for the heads of raiders. With the protagonist's hands, outposts of Lawson and Blade Caverns, Strange and Fort Hader caves are destroyed. The army ceases to exist. It is possible to imagine that Caleb Alquist and his crew were handling this contract, especially since he left notes describing their fight with these raiders. Considering that after this, Caleb was left alone and left the Mojave, as a reward was offered for him by the NCR for the massacre in Brighton, his own group perished completely while executing the contract. Also, a group of slave traders in Rio Grande perishes, again by the order or execution of Madsen. But those were all secondary plotlines. As for the main line, the protagonist finds Fogarty Manor and takes out all the defenders of the senator's son. Adam was delivered to Outpost Bravo, from where he was staged back to California and placed in prison, possibly even in Tibbets. Now let's move on to the final narrative mode, Depths of Depravity. I would assume that the events take place at the end of 2282 to the beginning of 2283, after the Second Battle of Hoover Dam, where the heat in the region have somewhat cooled down. Let's hypothetically take 2283. By this time, the NCR Mojave Affairs Office had moved to an unremarkable house in North Vegas, and instead of Sawyer, it is now led by April Morgan. The mod introduces a new companion, that very Charlie, a professional hired assassin. Let's hypothetically assume her as our protagonist. Charlie/the Courier receives a contract from Ryan O'Neill, a member of the West Side militia who previously placed orders for the Bodine clan and other small scoundrels at Tully's agency. Ryan complains that he has a drunken brother who 5 months ago enrolled his daughter Jessie in the Path of Light school, after which her trail vanished. Charlie couldn't find Jessie at school, and the school management led by Austin Burke himself says that she is currently on an educational trip to Shady Sands and will return in 6 months. Upon leaving the school, an agent of the Mojave Affairs office contracts Charlie and invites her to discuss a job, which involves digging into the Burke's family and the Path of Light. In fact, formally at this point in the mod, Charlie is introduced as a hire by the agency to protect the Courier, but we change the story a little bit. I continue to be surprised by the constant build-up of the narrative backbone of this entire series. We first learn about the situation with the Burkes in some newspaper in the Eliza mod, as some minor expositional incident. But by the 5th mod, this plotline has spun up and become the centerpiece of the story. The transition from plot to plot occurs smoothly, not like in James Bond movies, where a whole international empire of evil is revealed behind the terrifying Le Chiffre, about which no one in the British intelligence ever knew. An anarchist named Blake operates in the region, hunted by the Mojave Affairs Office, because he has a lot of compromising material on NCR politicians, and because he has his own radio and other media channels. His contract, Eddie Hurst, lives in the Han camp, although he is not a member of the faction. Charlie contracts him. Eddie agrees to help obtain compromised material on Henry Burke to lure Blake out. The thing is, Eddie was a clerk for Burke 14 years ago in 2268, so he knows a lot about his former employer. But you can't gather compromising material with just his testimony. You need to gather more evidence, and for that you need to talk to 3 people affiliated with the Burkes. The first person is Kevin Massey, who once worked at Burke's ranch and was later imprisoned by the NCR in the Mojave. When the prison break happened, he escaped with the others and temporarily settled at an abandoned train station. In exchange for help with new clothes and supplies, he shares what he saw: girls being brought to the ranch at times, forcibly taken inside the estate. In other words, the senator was involved in human trafficking. The second person is Hitman Paul Winters, a hired assassin for the Burke family, living out his days in a cabin north of Vegas. Alquist and Tully once learned the art of assassination from him. Paul agrees to share information in exchange for eliminating a ghoul who killed Paul's son on the streets of Westside 20 years ago. Paul says he controlled the behavior of the brought girls on site and had to kill them if they attempted to escape. The third person is porn mogul Stan Gold. He came to Vegas to buy out Benny Alberto's studio. Having found through a chain of contracts a girl who was brought to the Burke ranch several years ago, and in exchange for the murder of Stan Gold, the protagonist learns that Stan pays Austin Burke to collect young girls and boys under the guise of a shelter school and deliver them to him at the ranch, where they were raped by high-ranking NCR politicians, whom Burke then was blackmailing. The children were brought especially from Vegas and then sent back so they could not testify against Burke on NCR territory, although it would probably be easier to bury them somewhere. Of course, no one paid them, and after use they were simply thrown out into the street. While dirt is being collected on the senator, news comes from the NCR that Adam Burke hanged himself in the cell. While the evidence is being collected on the senator, news comes from the NCR that Adam Burke hanged himself in his cell. Meanwhile, the senator's henchmen came to Austin and killed him for leaking information about dirty deeds. Everyone who was in the center of the Path of Light was taken with them, after which they were taken to the desert, executed and buried, including little Jessie O'Neill. It was never stated what a schoolteacher was possibly doing with the kids in the basement, but considering all the cameras, equipment, attires, recording tapes, I think they were shooting some kind of children's TV show. The remaining thugs in the center ambushed Charlie, but she didn't let herself be taken by surprise. Meanwhile, Eddie meets Blake at the train station near the Repcon office, but he is killed, leaving behind a fake suicide note. Blake, however, is nowhere to be found. The Huns confirm that it definitely wasn't a suicide, as the note contains the name Edward, although Eddie's full name was Edison. In reality, the Office of Mojave Affairs was of absolutely no interest to Senator Burke and his dirty dealings. They just needed to get Blake, so with Edison's murder, the incriminating evidence against Henry Burke vanished. After concluding this matter, April Morgan shut down the operation and got rid of her overly clever hacker, after which she cut off all contact with Charlie. Thus, the threat of an investigation against Burke is severed, ending the 5th mod and the entire series in general. Let's think about how the lore of the mod aligns with the ending of Fallout New Vegas and previous mods. The Huns leave the wasteland and head to Wyoming, along with Eliza, towards new adventures. After cleansing New Rockwell of paladins, Sheriff Ferrar, feeling military support, will gradually rid the town of bandits, arresting them, including upon the request of the NCR. Subsequently, the town will once again become a routine mining settlement. With Austin Burke's death and the Senator's lack of interest in maintaining the charge's functionality, the Path of Light as an organization ceases to exist. As for Tully, with the annexation of the Mojave by NCR, he had to close his enterprise because headhunting is legislatively prohibited within the state's territory. Todd will die of an overdose at the age of 27, but at least he'll die happy. Charlie will reflect on the nature of her work and eventually retire. As already mentioned, Roy Sullivan will most likely face prison. As for Sheridan, the next planned mods were supposed to develop his storyline and culminate in an NCR assault on the prison. Let's assume that's exactly what happened. This concludes our discussion of the Overseers series. This wanderer has brought to us a huge chapter of lore and ventured into the wasteland. I hope you enjoyed these videos and stories. Play these mods yourself, endorse the author. You can even subscribe to Overseer's Discord and leave him a couple of supporting words. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. All of this greatly helps the channel grow, and it helps me find motivation to make even more videos for you. And that's all for today. As we move to other wastelands, stock up on food, weapons and bottle caps. Who knows, maybe next time we'll meet each other there. End of the holotape.